All right, let's move on down to my, as promised, 32 round mock draft. Told you guys I was bringing it to you. Let me bring it to you now. We're not going to go through these too long labored because I know that everyone will have their own individual ideas on this, but I do think this is a good practice to take a look at this, not only to better understand who's going to be available in the Hawks pick, but then also if we get a bit more of an accurate understanding of the first round mock, then we can also get a better understanding who's going to be available maybe in the second round, especially if our Seattle Seahawks were to happen to have traded back, which is something that many of us are expecting. There was a news report out a couple of days ago that the Hawks were kind of flirting with a couple of different teams out there and the possibility flip back with Washington. I've had a couple of you smart folks out there in my chat present that to me, maybe flipped out to Washington, get a couple of get their 2 second rounders that they're sitting on and just call it a, tit for tat trade, call it good at that point. Maybe something that goes down there. There's rumors of maybe even that Packer. I keep coming back to that one over and over again, and you're going to see that show up here in my mock draft where just the Hawks have done this dance with the Packers before. John has a very good history with them, a very good tight relationship with them. They have traded with the Packers for the Packers to move up into the first round twice before. So does lightning strike 3 times in the same place? We shall see. But let's get to this mock draft. I won't go again too long on this. I'll try to explain a little bit of my theory, reasoning behind each of these picks. But let's bounce these out. We've got Caleb Williams starting off the top. I'm not going to have to explain this one to you. This has been understood for a couple of months now. I think Washington is making a lot of, we're looking at this guy, we're looking at that guy. I know there's going to be plenty of people they're going to put in my chat. Washington said they're in on Jaden Daniels right now. This is right now the game of, we're not going to tell you the truth. We're trying to entice those teams. We love Drake May. We're going to take Drake May. But if we have a team that we know wants Jaden Daniels, we're going to let it out that we're kind of leaning to Jake Daniels. Maybe somebody's going to offer us then that trade for him. So there's a little bit of this, trying to drum up the market thing going on. And I think that that's still going to play out. And the bottom line on this is that I think at the end of the day, Drake May ends up landing as your number 2 overall quarterback. Certainly there could be some trade stuff going on. Guys, the teams bouncing up, teams bouncing back. I didn't want to incorporate too much of that because it's very hard to anticipate. And these trades aren't always every year a for sure thing in these first rounds because it's very hard to put them together. I have New England going with Jaden Daniels here. Certainly a team could be moving up, as has been rumored. Teams are trying to move up with New England, and then New England is definitely in the market to move back as a potential to try to gather some picks. But if they stand pat, I just don't think that they turn down Jaden Daniels and say no there. I think it's a 1-2-3 quarterback situation here right out the gate, just no doubt about it. Malik Neighbors right now I've got at 4 is kind of a shocker. I just wanted to kind of throw this one out there. I put this in, think about last night and really turning over because we're hearing a lot of people having him over Harrison Jr. there. And then you hear a report today that there might be some character stuff there with Malik. So I'm like, ugh, maybe I should have just stuck with Harrison. Could be Harrison, could be Neighbors. It doesn't really matter for the sake of this exercise because if it's Harrison here, then the team that's got Harrison a little bit later down on this board will then be the team that would go with Neighbors, I would think, or a Dunzier. So I don't think it would really maximally change the opening round. I did this when I was talking to you guys a little bit about this last week. I think that indeed Minnesota tries to trade up in front of the Giants in order to get J.J. McCarthy. They trade up with the Chargers, who move back about 6 spots or so to 11, so they're still picking at a very high point in this draft. Marvin Harrison Jr. then goes to the New York Giants. At that point, this again could be Neighbors, but I think that the Giants kind of they sort of are licking their wounds on this pick going, man, I wish we would have had a quarterback. But look, we need wide receiver help. The kid that they drafted last year didn't light the world on fire. Wan'Dale Robinson is a fine slot receiver who's kind of coming along a little bit, but they lost Saquon. They need some more ammunition to help out Daniel Jones. They've already got their left and right tackle right now. There's not a reason to go there at this point unless they're out on Neal. They're going to try to move his 6'7" butt down to guard, which I don't think they're going to do. Number 7, Titans. I know they're trying to trade back reportedly as well, but we'll just give them Joe Alt, which I think is, again, what they're just planning on doing if they end up sitting there. I go with Dallas Turner to Atlanta. Somewhat of a local guy, not too far away. This is a need for me with Atlanta. You get 2 really nice bookends between Dallas Turner and Arnold Ebiketie, and I think that that's a solid group in there to work with, along with still Grady Jarrett down there, who's still kind of getting it done, even though he's starting to get up there a little bit. So solidifies a little bit of what Atlanta's doing. I definitely think Atlanta is playing a little bit of putting some interest into their hat here a little bit on the the Michael Penix front. We're hearing a lot of kind of some heat growing with Atlanta right now between them and the Penix camp. So this also could be, as I've long said, I know everyone goes, well, no, they got Cousins, but that's Kirk Cousins coming off an ACL, or not an ACL, but an Achilles. It's not necessarily, and it's older Kirk Cousins. You probably want to have, if you're especially in go-for mode, a little bit of insurance behind him rather than just, throwing down the coin down the wishing well and saying, please let Kirk make it through another year. Please let that happen. So number 9, Chicago, Olufashanu. They need a left tackle. This is a no-brainer. I've got the Jets then going with Fatanu. I think the Jets have kind of need on that offensive line in general. They need just the kind of player Fatanu is, and a guy that could play left tackle, left guard, right tackle. He can go in there and fill in for them if they have one of their traditional, plague of injuries there on the offensive line. And as much as there's maybe a draw to get Rodgers some receiving help here, they did just sign the kid from the Chargers. And it's really, at the end of the day, the big problems of the Jets were pass protection as much as anything else. Certainly poor quarterback play was in there last year, but pass protection, just big part of it too. I've got the Chargers trading back here. This could be Amarius Mims. I've read reports of them being very, very interested in J.C. Latham, maybe having a little bit more of a preference for Latham than Mims. I could also see Fuwanga here, where all three I think are absolutely in play here for the Chargers. We talked about this a little bit last week. I won't belabor the point. I think 12-13, you're seeing Bo Nix, Michael Penix go. Penix is getting a lot of heat right now. Bo Nix maybe not as much, but I still think at the end of the day, their tape is so good as players that it's just going to, and they've got enough where neither of them are one-year wonders, where this is where I think eventually they're going to get picked. I think the Broncos and the Raiders are kind of just laying low in the weeds, hoping one of these two guys falls in there that they can get, and they're going to take advantage, I think, when they do. So I've got going 2 quarterbacks back-to-back. The Saints are in desperate need of tackle right now. The Trevor Penning thing, I told you guys a while ago, don't like me Penning when he came out of the draft. Ain't going to work. It hasn't worked. It hasn't looked good. The guy Ryan Ramczyk over on the right side for them may not even clear his medicals next year. They are in dire need of some tackle help at this point. I go with Talise Fuwanga. Colts go with Romo Odunzie, needing a little bit more receiver help to go there with Michael Pittman, the kid they took out of Cincinnati 2 years ago. Alex Pierce just kind of hasn't quite come along. Just hasn't come along. You get a real nice receiver on the outside for Anthony Richardson who he can throw it up to. You give Anthony Richardson a guy. With Anthony Richardson, you worry a little bit maybe about that accuracy and, especially coming off the shoulder injury. That was just the one thing with him coming out. You got a guy here who will have a really huge catch radius for him. Will be a guy who gets constantly open for him. I just really like the pick here with the Colts. Then we got Mims going to Green Bay, who moves up with Seattle. Seattle trades up, trades back. Green Bay trades up with Seattle at 16. Seattle moves back, gets the pure second-round pick for going back to 25. Recoups that second-round pick given up in the Leonard Williams trade. And then these picks here are, of course, a little bit more of definitely a guessing game on the back 9 here. But nonetheless, I wanted to kind of put them through here just because I think these are still maybe around at least the players who will go in the first round or somewhere in the neighborhood of these players going in the first round. The Jacksonville Jaguars come in at 17, take the first cornerback off the board, Quinyon Mitchell. I then have Brock Bowers at 18 going to the Bengals. It's going to break many of yours hearts. I know this if the Hawks are sitting there at 16 and Brock Bowers is available, but I tried to do a John Schneider first round mock here. I didn't try to do a Brandon mock. Okay. So go blame John. Go yell at him on this one. Okay. I've had to analyze the guy's mind for a few years. This is just what the minds thing told me. Okay. So blame John on this one. Don't blame me because it's not saying what I would do. It's just saying what I would anticipate. I think still the Hawks would do because I think that there's definitely a little bit of frothing at the mouth to move back in this particular draft. At number 19, I've got the Chargers looking to fill in for Mr. Donald, who's walked out the door. They're very happy to take the best defensive tackle off the board, as they once did with Aaron Donald back many years ago in Zerzan Newton. Jackson Powers Johnson goes to the Steelers at 20. Steelers need some help down there at center. They've got their quarterbacks. They need some little offensive line help. Wouldn't hurt down there. Go a long way, in fact. Next up are the Dolphins. They've moved on from Xavier Howard, of course. You've got a little bit of a Jalen Ramsey getting older. Cooper DeJean coming in there gives them a lot of help and versatility out there as well. Eagles need some cornerback help. They've got a bit of the same problem, aging corners on the outside. So Terry and Arnold's the pick at 22. Number 23, I've got the Vikings with their second first-round pick, taking Jared Verse. Now, the Vikings flipped a future first-round pick to move up in my proverbial scenario with the Chargers, but this could also be the Chargers in at this spot if it's these two first-round picks that it costs for them to move up to go get that quarterback in their future. If that's the case, I still think that there's a very good likelihood that this becomes a Jared Verse pick for the Chargers because they do not seem completely sold on either Bosa or Mack in the long term, and they've got to already start setting the stage for that, I think, or I would think, from Harbaugh's perspective. The Cowboys need some receiver help, and Brian Thomas, they are just tickled that he lands in their lap. You pair him out there with CeeDee Lamb. That's a scary little unit for the receiving crew for them. And the Seahawks finally drafted 25. I have them then taking Graham Barton. You get your left guard filled in. You get maybe a center of the future, either or here, but you're getting the interior of your offensive line handled early, and you still have your second-round pick later on here that you've picked up. Kool-Aid McKinstry, another cornerback, goes off the board to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Cardinals take Byron Murphy. They need some defensive line help. Texas goes back-to-back in my scenario here as the Buffalo Bills, fresh off to trading Stephon Gilmore to the Texans, use a little bit of their draft capital to go after Adonai Mitchell from Texas. We've got the Lions looking to pair up Mr. Hutchinson with another good edge rusher over on the other side. And I've got that being Latu. I'm trying to pronounce that right at least. Let me at least try. Very good edge rusher. I think dips down a little bit into the first round. And then my last three picks, I've got Cooper Bebe going to the Ravens. This is a guy that I know is being pushed down a lot of people board, or that maybe he's going to go down over here. The Ravens, to me, are a team that's kind of synonymous of, we will just not overthink things, and we'll grab the guy that lands in our lap. And this would be a guy landing in their lap, I think, that's very much a Raven-type player. Big, burly, strong, and I think that they would feel very good about him coming in there and starting over John Simpson, who they had starting out there last year. I've got the Niners with their fans begging them to get offensive line help, saying, okay, we hear you, you matter, and we're going to do something for you. And they take Tyler Guyton with number 31. And then the Chiefs say, hey, you know what? Can we get maybe one of the best route runners in this draft for this West Coast offense we run? And the rest of the NFL says, sure, Kansas City. Ladd McConkey ends up going to Kansas City at 32. A guy that I think would be just an absolute perfect fit for that offense that does, I know Mahomes is really great on the off-script stuff, but still has those tenets built into it of playing on script, on time. That's still a lot of a draw in to do that. So that would be my mock draft here in the, I can't really make it much bigger here. So you're going to have to, hopefully you can just scroll in on your phone if you're looking in on that. We had 7 tackles taken, 6 quarterbacks, 5 receivers, 4 cornerbacks, 3 edges, 2 guards, 2 defensive tackles, 1 tight end, and yes, a partridge in a pear tree. So that was my first round mock draft that I've got, the 32 first round teams. I think this would then, theoretically speaking, you're going to have a good dip at this point. Still, I think of it would start to lean out a little bit of the wide receiver and a little bit of the cornerback market, corner prospects, which is one of the deeper fronts. But of course, middle linebacker goes untapped. Edge is not really strongly hammered like it normally is. You still have your safeties setting up really well for the second round at this point. Obviously, running back's not been touched here too by this scenario, but that's not a real big shocker. Running backs, tight ends. I mean, others other than Bowers, no surprises there. So this would work out pretty well for the Hawks, I think, in a first round scenario too, for them setting up the land for the second round, where you come back middle second. Devondre Sweat, a junior Colson maybe going middle linebacker if there's a bit of more of a preference there, and you've already theoretically at least addressed that left guard position, so you can go, oh, we're good to go now. We can slide on into looking at other positions, and we don't have to feel like we got to go back in and grab this need. You took Barton there too in a place where there's at least some good value. I know I told yesterday we're doing the show and I was saying I wouldn't have Barton taken the first round, but this again Not a little bit about necessarily what I would do, but what I would maybe suspect John might be leaning towards